Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. So today I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently with the recap. I'm going to take a look at Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Now this has been one of my favorite games of all time, and the first time I ever played this was back in 1993. But I want to take a look back and see what made this game fun, my personal experiences with this game, and what I enjoyed about it. So with that being said, let's take a trip back to 1992. In order for me to tell this story, I have to actually rewind back to the early 90s, 1991 to 1993, and this kind of goes inside with the mid 90s and everything. When you were a kid growing up at this time, you would usually have a friend that had a gaming console that you did not own, and you would go to their house and play that gaming console. Well, I had a friend that lived next door to me, and he owned a Genesis. Now, he didn't own it yet, but he would also come over to my house and play the Nintendo. And I remember one day we were playing the Terminator, and he says, "Hey, I got this on Sega Genesis," and he told me he just got a Genesis. And I said, well, what's that? What's a Genesis? I knew what the Terminator was, but I didn't know what the system was. So we get over there, and first thing I see is that it is a top loader. You put the game on the top and not the front loader like on Nintendo. And I said, well, that's interesting that you put the game on top and not in the front like on Nintendo. So he puts in the game and turns it on, and the first thing I noticed is the music from the movie, and I thought, oh, that's cool. That's cool. And then once the game starts up, I said, oh, this is really cool. This looks so much better on here than on the Nintendo. And I just remember being in awe, like, oh, this is so cool. And then I went back to my house and asked my mom, hey, can we get a Sega Genesis? And she says, maybe I will think about it. Usually when you're a kid and you hear the words, maybe I'll think about it, it's 9 times out of 10 meaning no. It actually means no, you're not going to get it. Probably not going to happen. Just, forget about it. So I forgot about it because I just thought, okay, maybe still thinking about it. It might happen. It might not happen. Went upstairs, watched some cartoons, played some more Nintendo. So then Christmas of 1993 rolls around, and I remember going into the living room and seeing this big box for me, and I had no idea what it was. I said, I have no clue what this is, and they told me to open it. I open it up, and the first thing I see is Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm just like, who's this? And I thought it was a Nintendo character, and both of my sisters were like, that's Sonic the Hedgehog. I said, who's Sonic the Hedgehog? And the thing was, they wanted me to open the Genesis first and not the other games I got, which was actually Aladdin. So I opened it up all the way and I saw that it was a Sega Genesis. And I was like, oh my God, we got a Sega Genesis. This is so cool. It wasn't quite N64 kid, but I was still pretty excited. And the coolest thing about it was that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came packaged with the Genesis. So these days, there really are no games that are packaged with your consoles. But back in the 90s, pretty much every game console came with a game packaged in with it. So I thought that was so cool that I basically got a free game with it. And when I popped it in, it was just amazing. And I'm going to talk about that in the gameplay. But, I just remember thinking, I finally have a Genesis. We can finally get Sega Genesis games and play them and not have to worry about, just having Nintendo and Nintendo only. Now, I do want to get into the gameplay for a little bit, but much like all my other reviews and recaps, I will be discussing what I liked and did not like, as well as some of the things that you might like and should you consider playing this game for yourself. And I will be giving my final thoughts at the end of the episode. So with that being said, let's actually jump into the gameplay and see what I enjoyed so much about this game, what made this game so much fun, and why it is still fun today. Now, when it comes to the gameplay in Sonic the Hedgehog, really all the original Sonic the Hedgehog games, from 1 all the way to Sonic and Knuckles, were very fast-paced, and I was not used to this. I was used to Mario being a little slower, not too slow, because he did have the dash ability. But when you're going through the levels, it was a lot easier to get through the levels for Mario. And Sonic, it was just one of those things where you go and you're just thinking, man, he's going really quickly, and how am I supposed to control this character because he's too fast? And really, the first time I played the game, I actually died within the first couple seconds of the first level. I died, passed the controller over to my sister, said, here, you try it, because I'm not making it here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, because there were enemies flying all over the screen. There were things jumping at you. There were things shooting at you. And I'm sitting here going, how am I supposed to do this? This is not Mario. But the controls were exactly the same as Mario, where you do jump on the enemies to destroy them. And it was just a little different because you had to get used to what was going on screen. Now, it was a Sega Genesis, so everything was faster on the Sega Genesis. That was their thing. Everything's faster. Sega does what Nintendo don't. That was their thing. And it was just, a lot of those games were super duper fast. And I'm just sitting here going, man, these games But once I got through the first level, it was easy. I had to practice a little bit with the first level, get through the area, get through the enemies, defeat the boss. And this was something that I had with Sonic the Hedgehog, really all the games in general. Each game had that one level that I always got stuck on, that I always had trouble with. And the second game was actually the second level, the Chemical Plant Zone. I got through the first act, and then I had trouble getting through the second act. I just could not figure out what to do, and I kept drowning in the underwater section of that level. I don't know how or why I kept drowning. I just didn't quite figure out what was going on. It said, okay, there's a timer. What's going on? What am I supposed to do? And then when we realized, oh, you need to jump out of the water, it was easier. But then I got to the boss, and the boss was kind of kicking my butt for that first week that we had the Genesis. And we were trying it out. We were trying everything we could. We just could not defeat that boss. Now, keep in mind, I was also renting games from Blockbuster at the time, so I wasn't quite playing Sonic the Hedgehog every day. So once I finally got to that third level, and I remember we were at my grandparents' house, and so once I got to that third level, I got to it, and I was like, oh man, we beat the second level. We can get through it. We can go to the third level, but we had to leave and go back home. So I had to pack everything up, and I wasn't going to be able to play the third level until I got back to the house. And once I did, that was another level that I got stuck on. And one of the things that I always enjoyed about the Sonic the Hedgehog games was that you just keep pushing forward. You keep going forward, you keep practicing, you keep memorizing the enemy movements, the enemy placements, the boss patterns, everything. Just keep memorizing where everything is and how to defeat some of these bosses. Because, yeah, Robotnik, you have to hit him and everything, but some of his varieties or variants or versions are a little more difficult. And one of those other levels that I got stuck on in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the Casino Night Zone. I could get through the level, no problem, but once I got to that boss fight, I could not defeat him for the life of me because he has lightning on the bottom of his portal or his little pod, and I'm like, I can't hit him, I can't jump up and hit him, can't figure out what to do. And you had to use the bumpers because it was a casino. Basically, you're in a pinball section. You had to use those bumpers and bump Sonic up in the air and then land in the right spot to hit Robotnik on top. I couldn't figure that out for the longest time. I just kept trying to hit him from the bottom, on the side, everywhere. I just didn't know you had to hit him from above. And when I finally figured it out, I said, okay, I know how to do this. I can defeat him. And I defeated him, and I was able to get to the rest of the game from the Hilltop Zone, the Oil Zone, Mystic Zone, the Sky Zone. All those zones I was able to get through no problem, but it was that final stage that gave me the biggest issue of all with this game. And when I finally got there, I thought, I'm at the end of the game. And I remember a friend of mine telling me about some cheat codes to use to basically skip over to that level, because I said, I got to the end, but I really don't want to play through the entire game again just to get to that one spot. And he says, well, just use this cheat code. You unlock the debug mode, and basically you can choose whichever level you want. You can turn it into Supersonic if you want. And I didn't want to do Supersonic yet. I didn't want to cheat that much. I just wanted to get back to the final level. So I ended up using the cheat code and got to the final level. And Metal Sonic is basically the problem I had with that level. Was I kept trying to jump in him, and I kept just barely missing his hit point, and I kept hitting the spikes behind him. Now, the problem with that final level is that there's not enough rings to basically carry you through both boss fights. You fight Metal Sonic, and then you have to fight Robotnik and his big robot. Now, there's not enough time or not enough rings to basically handle both of them. If you lose your rings when you're fighting Metal Sonic, you want to try and grab as many as you can before he hits you again, because if you're down to nothing and he hits you one more time, it's game over. Because if you played any Sonic the Hedgehog game from back in the 90s, you know that when Sonic loses his rings and he gets hit again, that is it. Just like in Mario, when he gets hit and he loses the mushroom and he gets hit again, that is it. It's over. He's done. Game over for Mario. So I kept practicing and practicing and practicing on this final boss fight until I finally defeated him. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my god, I just defeated Robotnik. I beat Sonic 2. And I remember thinking, this is impossible. I did not beat this game. No way did I complete this game. I had been spending almost the entirety of the 90s, from when I got the game in 93 all the way to 1998. I had been trying to defeat all 3 Sonic games. Now, the fun thing about this is also that I defeated Sonic 1 and 3, as well as Jurassic Park on the Genesis and Donkey Kong Country within the same week. So that was a hell of a week for gaming for me. And I think Donkey Kong was actually the first one that I completed. Any game out of all of them, out of all my games back in the 90s, Donkey Kong Country was the first one that I ever completed. And then Sonic 3 was the second, and then Sonic the Hedgehog 2. But Sonic 3 is a story for another time, because that is just as frustrating as this one. But when I finally defeated the game, I just remember sitting there thinking, it's done. I've completed it. I did it. I completed the game. I beat Robotnik, and I can move on to something else. And I just remember seeing the end credits, Sonic falling from the sky back down to earth, basically, and just spinning, and just the music and everything. And then you go through the credits, and it shows Sonic going through basically the Emerald Hill Zone, but they're playing all the songs from all the levels. And I want to say he was going through every level. They were backtracking, doing one of those montages of him going through every single level. And a lot of games did that in the 90s. Punch Out did it, where they showed you all the opponents you fought. Mega Man X did that with all the enemies. It was really cool. I wish games would go back and do that again. But that was just one of the things that I really enjoyed. That was just something that I really enjoyed about this game, was just the fact that it was very easy to control, very easy to get used to. Once you got used to it, it wasn't that difficult. You were able to get through the game with no problems. Now, newer gamers might have a little more trouble with this because they're used to the newer Sonic games. It's not near as bad as Sonic 06. I mean, the controls in that game are horrid, and I will cover that, not in a good way, but I will cover that game on a future episode as well. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I mean, it was my first Sega Genesis game, and it was one of the first Sega Genesis games I ever completed. And I just remember that whole week thinking, oh my god, I beat 4 games that I've been trying to complete for years. And it's just that thought of practicing the game, pushing forward, memorizing where everything was, using the password systems in these games. Because when I was playing them before, when I was a kid, I didn't use the password function. I didn't know what that was. I didn't write down any passwords. I just kept going, starting from the beginning and trying to get all the way to the end without having to use any passwords, any cheats, anything. I didn't even know there were cheats for Sonic the Hedgehog until 1998, when my friend at school told me, hey, yeah, there's cheat codes for this game. And he basically helped me complete the games using those codes. Now, I would have liked to have used them. Actually, Sonic 3, I completed that game without using any codes, because that has a save battery in the cartridge. So you can easily just save your game as you're going through the game. And really, it's just Sonic 1 and 2 were 2 of the toughest games for me to get through. And when I finally got through them, it was the best thing ever. Now, with that being said, we are coming to the end of the episode, and I do want to get my final thoughts on this game as a whole, and why you should consider playing it yourself if you have not played this game yet. Should you play Sonic the Hedgehog 2? Without a doubt, yes, you need to play this game if you are a fan of Sonic games or a fan of Sega games. I want to say, if you have played Sonic Mania, this is definitely a reason to go back and play these games, because you can see where the inspiration came from these older Sonic games to go into Sonic Mania. Now, there is a Sonic 4. I don't recommend that because it plays more like modern Sonic. It still has the homing controls. They're not very fun. They're kind of annoying, actually. I did not like that game. Sonic Generations is probably the closest thing to these older games that we had before Mania came out. So if you played Sonic Generations, at least the 2D section, the side-scrolling sections of that game, you can see where they got the inspiration for that too. And they did that for a reason. It was the anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog. I believe it was the 20th anniversary, and they were trying to celebrate in that way, and they wanted to celebrate with the fans and give back to the fans who grew up with these games. And it's just one of those things that I really love that Sega did. Now, yeah, some of their decisions with the series have been kind of not so good, but really, this game is fun. All 3 of the old Sonic games are very fun. And if you're looking for a version of this game, the physical edition for the Genesis, the cartridge, really is not that hard to come by. I have seen it at plenty of retro shops, plenty of stores that sell older games, and it can run you probably $5 or $10. Not too much. I mean, it was one of those games that was really easy to find even back in the 90s. You saw it everywhere. You saw Sonic the Hedgehog everywhere. Every store, every shop, every gaming store, every Walmart, every Target. You found this game, no problem. But I would recommend the physical edition for the PS4, the collections, or even if you can find a Sega Genesis Mini, definitely pick that one up. I know that one's not really available as well or as much anymore, so it's kind of harder to come by one of those. But if you do find one, for a decent price at least, pick it up, because there's a lot of other great games on that system as well. But I'm still going to recommend the Sega Genesis Classics Collection for the Xbox One, the PS4, and the Nintendo Switch. And if you still have a PS3 or a 360, you can actually find a collection on there as well. But if you have an Xbox One, the 360 version is backwards compatible, I believe, with the Xbox One and the Series X. But the PS4 version, or this PS3 version, is not backwards compatible with the 4 because they didn't incorporate that into the PS4. So you can get the PS4 collection and play it on the PS5, which is what I'm doing because it runs a lot faster, a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and it has not all 3 Sonic games. It's got 1, 2, 3D Blast, and Spinball because there was an issue going on with Sonic 3 around that time and they couldn't add it to any collections. Legally, they could not add it to any collections because of some stuff going on. But I really recommend this game. I cannot recommend it enough. And before we leave, though, I want to know, what is your favorite Sonic game and what is your favorite Sonic the Hedgehog memory? Like mine was the day that I beat the game. What is your favorite memory? Let me know down in the comments below. Before we head out, I wanted to thank everybody again for watching, and I really do enjoy making these episodes because it gives me a chance to go back to the past and relive these games with you guys and talk about these games that I loved growing up, especially for the newer audience, because there's a lot of newer retro fans coming out who didn't get to play these games. They weren't around when they first released and everything, so they're going back and trying them out for the first time now, and they're loving them. So I love the fact that I'm able to show these older games to a newer audience and they can go back and check these games out and become fans themselves. It's just a great feeling. Now, if there are any videos or any games you would like for me to cover in a future episode, any top 5 videos you'd like for me to cover, please let me know down in the comments below. And if you did enjoy this video, be sure to check out my retro recap series, which is actually in the link down below and the title card right above there. So definitely check that out, and y'all have a good one.